Welcome to the DaVinci Hour podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Maxwell Cooper, and in this podcast series, I interview physicians, medical innovators, and entrepreneurs making an impact on healthcare. This podcast is produced by DaVinci Academy, a multimedia medical education company that provides podcasts, video courses, and digital textbooks. You can see more on our website, www.dviacademy.com, and our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/DaVinci Academy Med. This podcast is sponsored by Doc2Doc, the personal lending platform designed for doctors by doctors. Do you have some big expenses in the near future? Maybe you're moving, applying to residency or fellowship, fixing up your car or home, or starting a new practice. Doc2Doc believes that traditional lenders overestimate the risk of lending money to doctors, residents, and medical students, focusing too much on the challenges of their financial past and giving them insufficient credit for the promise of their financial future. Check out Doc2Doc's personal loan options at doc2doclending.com/DaVinci. Hey everybody, welcome back to the DaVinci Hour podcast. I'm honored this week to be joined by Dr. Tamir Wolf from Theator, a new surgical education and AI platform out in Palo Alto, California. So Dr. Wolf, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So maybe give us a little bit of background on you. You have a fascinating background. You know, you were obviously trained as a physician and were in the Israeli Navy for a long time before you got into the world of med tech, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you came to where you are today.
Sure. I'll do it briefly. I was born and raised in Israel. Did my MD PhD there. Did it as an ROTC. And subsequently served in the equivalent of SEAL Team 6 in Israel for quite some time. After 7-8 years, decided I wanted to do something different, a little less intense. I didn't realize that entrepreneurship is as intense, maybe not life-threatening, but as intense. And so after my my naval experience, went through business school and then through the motions, but ultimately found myself in the health tech area, which is fascinating.
That's awesome. Yeah. So were you essentially like a battlefield surgeon in a way? Like, was that kind of your role in that time period of your life?
Yeah. Most of what I did was trauma surgery, usually under fire.
Oh, that's pretty intense. Yeah. So I guess clinically you're traditionally trained as a surgeon, which is very fitting for what you're doing now. I'm curious, give us maybe an overview of what theater is, like what's the clinical need you guys are trying to solve, and I guess maybe what was the inspiration for starting it as well.
Sure. So, you mentioned education. I think it's way more than education. I think I always like to start with the unmet need. And I think, today in the world of surgery, there's tremendous variability and disparity in the field. Ultimately, where you live determines if you live around the world and even in the US. So, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, I think that there really is very limited understanding as to why there is variability and disparity. Ultimately, I think, in the OR, it's like Vegas, what happens in the OR stays in the OR. And so we have really good understanding of outcomes, but we don't really understand what leads to them. And so theater really tackles this problem through what we call our surgical intelligence platform. And the idea is to leverage next-gen AI and computer vision technology to analyze intraoperative, what happens intraoperatively by leveraging the existing hardware stack. So a lot of the procedures performed today are either straight stick or robotic, but are done minimally invasively. So the idea is to routinely capture that and analyze it, and to identify in an unbiased way insights that are ultimately actionable that can help us actively improve the way that we do things in the OR, enhance quality of care, enhance patient safety, and ultimately also, I think, provide hospital systems with insights that they really need in order to consistently drive quality improvement and care of patients.
That's really interesting. I was watching one of your guys' informational videos, and you're talking about all this laparoscopic surgery, video content that gets essentially discarded in many places and is not used or analyzed or anything. I think that's amazing, because in IR we kind of take a highlight. I think we take like a highlight reel of the the main action points during the procedure or the critical steps. But it's interesting in surgery that's, obviously surgeons dictate what they did and everything like that. But to have like that visual feedback and understanding of what one, I think that's really fascinating, really innovative to use that technology. And then from what I understand, you're also kind of analyzing that to find like the critical steps, the critical decision points. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of like the way I like to think about data in general in the world of healthcare, like I call this DRIP, data rich, insight poor. So we're gathering a lot of data points, but like how meaningful are they? And for example, one of the reasons I think we don't have really good understanding of what happens in the operating room is because of the fact that the only thing after surgery is the operative report, which is narrated and obviously has shortcomings. Whereas video is really what's called the ground truth. You see exactly what happened. It's already being, the entire procedure is performed under visual guidance. So you already have that. But the mind-boggling thing is that that's like, left on the OR floor pretty much after every case. I think there's growing understanding in the field, whether it's surgeons, medical centers, innovative professional societies across the board and specialties, that video will really become a key core component of quite a few initiatives, whether it's GME, like education training, or I think very importantly quality initiatives, patient safety, etc. I think even certification and credentialing. So I think that will happen, and we're the company that is going to drive that.
That's awesome. So with, I guess, aiding surgeons through the process, obviously I see the obvious utility for, residents in training. Maybe they didn't get enough exposure to certain cases, or they want to prep for their cases. But from what I understand, you're also developing this for, the practicing surgeon, that's out in the world trying to, either learn new procedures or improve on what they're doing. And is that kind of the end, maybe the end user in mind at this point?
I think the end user. So there are different stages along the totem pole, and I think we can all use decision support to some extent. I think like the key paradigm that we're trying to like shift away or shift to is changing the way that like intraoperative video is considered or regarded. So you can think about it in the traditional way of, let's take a look at a video, fast forward, rewind, take a look at what we did. Most surgeons, for the most part, don't really have time to do this routinely. And so that's one thing. So we want to enable that. But the other thing is, think about it, like with video is such a huge treasure trove of data that today is untapped. And what we're doing is leveraging technology in order to do what's called structuring of a video. Once you structure video, and we're identifying key components of the procedure, key events, key milestones, key layers within a procedure, ultimately situation awareness, decision making. So a lot of like different components of a procedure. And once you start identifying these, you can correlate them with patient characteristics and ultimately outcomes. You can understand like what leads to better outcomes. And then you start driving, like, I think, the real shift in the way that things are being done. But today, if you have like, hours and hours of surgery, even if hospitals do, routinely capture them, which I highly doubt, what do you do with them afterwards? Surgeons, don't have time to review. They don't have time to, identify and annotate. And actually, it's not even in the nature of surgeons to do it. As opposed to other specialties within healthcare, for example, radiologists or pathologists, that spend their entire learning curve on identifying a variety of like different things. And so what we're doing here is really enabling surgeons to leverage data that is structured in ways that haven't been available to them before. And not only surgeons, but like the surgeons are end users, but it's surgeons, it's clinical leadership, it's administration, it's a wide range of stakeholders with aligned incentives within a hospital system.
That's amazing. And so I guess the end goal is also to not only help before or after, but like during the procedure, right? That would probably be, groundbreaking, being able to say like, this is what the data is for making this decision. Because I'm quickly learning even early in my training that, a lot of it's, yes, the hand motions and knowing what to do, but it's more the decision making. Like, what do I do when I hit this kind of step or this challenge?
Exactly. I think the key is like, if you speak to surgeons who've been operating for decades, they'll quickly tell you that, the dexterity aspect is something that they've always had. But they think that the thing that they really, added along their journey is, are those capabilities around situation awareness and understanding, and then decision making. And I think that's what those components are really what differentiate between, a good surgeon, an average surgeon, and the top surgeons. And the idea is that today, unless, in your subjective training, there's someone at the top that accompanies you, these are sets of experience that you're not exposed to. And so what we're trying to do is really codify, best practices, codify decision making, so that we can ultimately, and this really is the holy grail you mentioned, be able to augment the human surgeon. And the sci-fi version is be the intelligence that really runs robotic platforms, but that's a bit ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm curious, how do you guys curate all this data, and are you using, some AI or machine learning? Or are you having some surgeons manually review some of this? I guess, what's your kind of behind the scenes, if process of what you can disclose on that? How are you guys able to produce this?
So I think I like to say ML can be three different things. So it could be manual labor. That's where everything starts. It could be machine learning, which is where the technology is, and it could also be magical eyes. So we're not doing the magical eyes part. There's a lot of human work that goes into this, and a lot of our initial core capabilities and scalability is due to the way that we structured our operational aspect. But really, I think the key differentiator, which makes us really unique in the world, is we have extremely talented individuals that have built an amazing and very scalable algorithmic capability that can automatically identify, key moments, steps, everything that I mentioned earlier on, in a way that is truly scalable. So today we're deep diving into a variety of specialties, mainly around soft tissue, including general surgery, bariatric, colorectal, urology, gynecology, thoracic, et cetera, hundreds of procedures. And every procedure that we add to our data repository really helps inform us on every other procedure. So it's a lap chole doesn't help us only improve our accuracy in lap choles, but it also aids us in hysterectomies and in prostatectomies, et cetera. And that really is a unique capability that our team has developed.
That's incredible. I guess shifting a little bit to the entrepreneurial aspect of your journey, or building a business like this. I guess one, you have so many different players involved. I would think the team for building something like this would be so critical, as it is with many entrepreneurial ventures. I guess what's been your process for building such a diverse team? I imagine you have clinicians, you have obviously business minded people, and then I imagine software developers and engineers. I guess what's been your process for building such a diverse and effective team?
So it's a really good question, and ultimately I think you can have amazing ideas and great technology, but if you don't have the right team, then it's not going to work. And so I'd say the single most important thing that I think I did extremely well was find a co-founder very early on. Building a company is extremely difficult and lonely at the helm. It's very lonely before you build a team, and once you build a team, you still have all that responsibility. So I think I have an amazing co-founder. His name is Dotan. He's a computer vision whiz with a ton of experience. We talked before about the Israeli military. So he comes from intelligence, where he led computer vision, and he's an all-around amazing individual, great technical acumen, but also really sharp, from building a team perspective and a business. And together with him, we've built, a stellar team. I think a lot of it is the way we view leadership. So we, and culture is very important to us. And so the way that we look at our culture at theater, I think that's what enabled us building a really amazing team around us. So the approach is this approach that you can in general call no rules. You basically bring individuals that are super talented, that have common sense, and that you can trust to do what's in the best interest of the company. And then, there's just freedom and responsibility, and you let them run. And there are no, minimum policies, minimum procedures. You just let them run as quick as they can. Sometimes they make mistakes, and we all learn together and move on. But it's I think bringing on board individuals that are just extremely driven, and that you can trust. Once you have that, then everything else is easy.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I noticed on your website you have kind of a set core values, and I imagine when you're bringing people on, you hope that they buy into that, and I imagine that, like you said, that helps people to just kind of run with it.
I think so, and honestly, the values are values that the Pen and I didn't come up with these alone. We spent the first 6 months bringing on board folks, and then together we did this. And these values are be human first, getting shit done, your voice counts, shared understanding. And I think once you have talented folks and you give everyone context to make decisions and move quickly, I think that in and of itself is something that brings on board additional talent and the best and brightest. And so I think that honestly, I think that has been one of the key reasons for our success up until now.
That's amazing. I'm curious from your perspective as you were trained traditionally as a physician, you've spent time obviously in the Israeli Navy. What, I guess, many people comment, oh, physicians don't always make the best business people and all that. I guess, what's your response to that, I guess? And then also, where have you picked up kind of some of your business training, because at least in the US, we don't get much of that training, at least in med school or in residency. Maybe it was different for you, but just curious about that.
No, and honestly, I didn't even learn about variability and disparity in surgery when I was in medicine. There are a lot of things that you don't see when you're in the system. So, I think I had a good opportunity to also step out for a little bit and been given I think a blessing of a different vantage point, outside the daily grind of a physician, resident, fellow, etc. And I think that's something that I'm very grateful for. I think even if talking to my friends who are leaders, CEOs of hospitals, heads of departments, etc., I see a trend today in which even in med school, folks are getting at least glimpses of the entrepreneurial world. And I think that just we were able in the traditional, or 15, 20 years ago, to have this conversation around how do we combine clinical practice and research. I think today it's it's expanded a bit to how do we combine between the routine clinical practice, research, and then entrepreneurship, or working alongside a company to bring and develop a device, pharma, bio, software into play. And I think that's really important because as a company, we can bring technology, etc., which is really the things that we excel. But we are very dependent on the cross-pollination with the clinicians that we work with. Ultimately, we serve them, and so the bottom line. So the clinicians and leadership and also administration, but we're here to serve them, to improve the way that ultimately patients are provided care. And so this cross-pollination is extremely, extremely important. And I think that more and more individuals that are early on in their professional careers as physicians already realize that, and are striving to make some kind of connection, headway, or interaction with, let's call it industry.
Sure. So I'm curious, who are I guess from the business model standpoint, I guess who is purchasing your platform? And I guess is it, health systems? Is it individuals? Is it maybe a combination of the both? I guess essentially, in short, how do you guys, make money?
So it's interaction with the health systems. And we basically work together with the hospital to basically cover, all their operating rooms. where MIS is being done. And then we just capture and start analyzing everything that is being done. We provide immediate value to the surgeon stakeholders, but we also provide, much more sophisticated insight into what's going on in the OR to clinical leadership and to administration. And, so yeah, in a nutshell.
No, that's really interesting. I'm curious, as you know very well, health systems can be skeptical to new technology or adopting or slow to adopt new technology and evolve. I guess what has been your kind of pitch to them or way to counter some of their skepticism to adopt your new technology?
Yeah, so I think there's really a difference between those who like talk the talk and those who actually want to deliver better care. If we continue, like the biggest challenge to us has been status quo. There are a few players in the field, but no one comes close to our capabilities. And it really is all about like changing the status quo. Because as a patient, you go in and you have a CT, you have access to that CT, but like you spend 8 hours under the knife unconscious, and, most of the time you don't have anything that really documents what happened. So I think there's like a fundamental shift that has to happen. And, and again, like, we can't keep on doing things in the same way that we have been doing them for decades and expect a different result. So we want to improve the way that care is being provided. We want to improve quality of care. We can't rely on incomplete and sometimes inaccurate data and information. We need to do something different. And so, there are thousands of hospitals across the country. We're working with the most innovative ones to start, creating a momentum. And, once that happens, once hospitals see us working with the Mayo Clinics, et cetera, like, then, they start coming on board. Nothing's immediate. And there really is like a cultural shift that has to happen here. But, if we bring on board, these innovative hospitals and we set the tone, everyone else will follow suit. And this is a part of the challenge of doing something completely new and radically changing the way that surgery is taught and performed.
That's amazing. I'm curious that the name theater, does that stem from the origin of, like over 100 years ago, the surgical theater, and I think it's amazing, how antiquated in some ways just medical education in general is, that it's evolved somewhat, but I guess kind of a two-part question, the name and then, this adding to that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's really between us and everyone that's listening. Nothing's really changed in hundreds of years. So we have like, a new energy device, and we have like a new robotic arm, but like nothing fundamentally has changed in the way that we're doing things. And so obviously, like I mentioned, that really is the challenge. The name theater, I wanted something short, and yes, it stems from a combination of things. So the operating theater, obviously, also the fact that we are like a core component of everything that we're analyzing is video. So, movie theater, that's a combination of these things, and obviously the operating room, OR. So
that's very cool. Very cool. So I guess what's been some of the feedback you've gotten from, surgeons using the technology? How have they felt like it's benefited them or helped their learning, if you will?
Some of the feedback that we've received is like, we started out at one center with this study wherein we provided we did like randomized trial, and we provided like 50% of the residents and fellows with the platform, and the other 50 we didn't. And like the feedback that we got was that it's not ethical not to provide everyone with access to the platform to review what they're doing. So that's some of the feedback that we've received. From clinical leadership, the feedback has been that we are suddenly, starting to measure what really matters. And I'll give you an example. There's this gap or tension between administration and clinical leadership, whereas administration, wants surgeons to perform more and more and more and more, which means, they want you to do procedures in minimum time. But that doesn't tell you the whole story, because, you want to do procedures quickly, but you want to do it high quality. And also, like, not every procedure is the same as another. And so some of the tools that we're starting to create, for example, automated complexity assessment based on the visual cues, first 10 seconds that the scope is in, allows us to start stratifying procedures procedure length, for example, by complexity, which allows us now to take a look across the board and say, all right, this is a procedure that's very complex, and the surgeons are doing it in a very short period of time. How do we take what they're doing and start distributing that or disseminating that across the board to improve things within an enterprise system? Those are some of the tools that we're starting to create. It's really early in the game, honestly, but I think that the ability to leverage technology to have like a much better understanding of like intraoperative parameters, performance, proficiency, efficiency, etc., is extremely important and can help not only like a surgeon, but again like multiple stakeholders within the ecosystem that ultimately improves the way that we provide patient care.
That's amazing. I'm curious, obviously you've tested this out on surgeons in residency and that and training. I'm curious, do you see this eventually also being used as like almost like a testing platform, like for surgeons for their boards or for their recertification? Is that something you guys have looked into?
Yeah, so the platform is obviously capable of doing all that. And like we're working today with residents, with fellows, with full-fledged surgeons. The American Board of Surgery, for example, is already evaluating, video as a way of doing, potentially doing some of the things that you mentioned. So the short answer is definitely yes. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so I don't have much money, but I heard that when some folks go and build a house, or they want to talk to an architect, they take a look at the book of that architect who shows you, right, this is what I did. When a surgeon like applies now to like a new position after fellowship, everything is very subjective. I envision a future where, they open a portfolio, right? This is how I perform. So I think like the routine capture of video as a tool, connecting the dot, analyzing it, and then connecting the dots to, to outcomes, etc., allows us like a wide range of things. This being just one of them, but in a way that's a lot more objective than anything that we've ever done before.
That's amazing. So innovative. I'm curious, again, building a company like this with this type of technology, what has been your guys' experience with the fundraising aspect? I guess like where are you at in that sequence of events? And I guess is that something you're probably always actively working on?
Yeah. So we're post A. It's raising is always a challenge, especially today. But we have some amazing investors, that are helping us along the way, including, for example, Insight Partners and Mayo Clinic that have invested in us as well, because they really believe in what we're doing. It's always a challenge in today's environment. It's like even more so. But I think the companies that stand out, as being innovative, really changing, like mission driven, that are really hell bent on changing the world and making like a positive dent. And then obviously justify, it's not an academic like initiative, right? Then justify everything from a business perspective. I think those companies are gonna endure.
Sure. As we wrap up here, I want to ask you about kind of going off that. What's your kind of vision or milestone you want to hit like in the next 6 to 12 months? I mean, obviously things rapidly change, but I'm curious as the CEO, like where are you hoping to hit in the next kind of 6 to 12 months period?
All of this is around like, bringing on board like additional innovative hospital systems to be a part of like this revolution that we're creating here.
That's amazing. My last question I ask everybody is, when you're not working on theater, what do you do? What are your passions outside of work? How do you find that balance if there is one?
When I'm not thinking about theater, I'm thinking about theater. It's more time consuming, I think, than residency or fellowship for those who can relate. But I have 2 amazing kids. I have like a wife that likes to see me every once in a while. And I think like without the family support, it's very difficult to like jump into a journey like this. So I'm blessed from that perspective. But honestly, there's not a moment that I do not think theater.
No, you're dedicated to the game. That's admirable. And family support is always important. I guess the last thing is where can people, and we'll link to this in the description, where can people find out more about theater and connect with you if possible?
Yeah, so theater, theator.io domain, and my email is tamir@theater.io. So feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Wolf, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. We really appreciate it. I think we all learned a lot from your journey and from theater's journey, and look forward to following it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Cooper.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DaVinci Hour podcast, presented by DaVinci Academy. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your podcast platform of choice to catch the latest episodes. Please leave a comment or a review and share it with a friend. Lastly, you can find all of our podcasts, video courses, and books on our website, dviacademy.com. Thank you for listening.